Hi, thanks, Jill and Sarah. I am very excited to be introducing CAConrad. It is sad that we cannot be together in person. This event would be better in person. And we can look to Conrad's somatic poetry to take stock of why this is so. In 2005, CAConrad brought together their ritual practice and their poetry. The rituals, created by Conrad, consist of peculiar and intricate activities, such as wearing ornaments and eating foods of a single color, repeatedly swallowing a small crystal, or reading tarot cards to packages of meat in Walmart. The rituals are designed to release Conrad from late capitalist processes funneling into shrinking targets of efficiency and grant their senses absolute permission to perceive this world in new and unexpected ways. During the rituals, they take notes that provide the words for their poems. Developing this hybrid of ritual and poetry launched a surge of creative output. In the past 17 years, Conrad has published 9 full-length poetry collections. I will name just a few titles. In 2010, The Book of Frank, written over the course of 16 years and now translated into 9 languages. In 2012, A Beautiful Marsupial Afternoon. In 2014, Eco-Deviance. In 2017, While Standing in Line for Death, recipient of a Lambda Literary Award. And in 2021, Amanda Paradise, Resurrect Extinct Vibration. They teach at Columbia University in New York City and Sandberg Art Institute in Amsterdam. In 2016, Delinquent Films released a feature-length documentary about CAConrad's life and poetry. The film is titled The Book of Conrad. Emily Dickinson, Sigmund Freud, Franz Kafka, Audre Lorde, and Eileen Myles are just some of the names referenced by Conrad with admiration. A huge gathering of writers and poets is enlisted to help meet the disasters that traverse Conrad's life, including heterosexual violence and the HIV/AIDS pandemic, American and coalition wars in the Middle East, and anthropogenic climate change and mass extinction. However, Conrad's poetry is neither documentarian nor ekphrastic. Poetry is not, for Conrad, a device for recording or transcribing given images. Instead, their poetry activates the space between molecules, unsettles substances that previously felt solid, and invites the audience to look carefully at what seems to be holding us together. In a poem titled For the Feral Splendor That Remains, Conrad writes, quote, "In a future life, would we like to fall in love with the world as it is, with no recollection of the beauty we destroy today? Please join me in welcoming CAConrad."
Thank you so much, Ben. That was an incredible introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I know that's I know a few people are having trouble getting online. I've been getting emails. It'll be fine. It's Mercury retrograde. Just roll with it. It's pretty good. So I'm grateful to everybody who brought me. Ben, that introduction was beautiful. Thank you. The molecules between. I really do wish that all of us who are here could be in Toronto right now. It's one of my favorite cities. And in fact, there are precious few poetry-only bookstores in the world. And Toronto has one of my favorites. It's called Knife, Fork, and Book by the beautiful Kirby, one of my favorite queer poets. If you ever get up to Toronto, it's a terrific bookshop. And it's such an incredible city for the arts and for poetry, very nurturing. But what do I know? I'm just visiting. It just seems that way. I visit cities and say these things and people are like, oh yeah, well, you should come back on Thursdays. All right, let's see. So I would like to share the screen with you in a minute with some images that I put together for today. But I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about why I do what I do and how I came to do it. It is, I feel like it's important. I'll be as brief as possible with this part. So I started writing poetry in 1975. I'll keep all this part as brief as possible about what I was doing in 1975. Let's just leave that at that. But in 1984, I as a teenager, I ran away, basically. I fled where I grew up to become a poet in Philadelphia. And that felt all well for a while. You know, I felt like I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So from 1975 to 2005, I'm writing poems in what I call the old-fashioned or traditional way, where you're inspired and you write. And maybe sometimes the inspiration comes from something you do. I find that very often when you're reading poetry, it's like it strikes flint in you. Just reading it, you get into that, you're mesmerized into that rhythm, and you get into that space and you start writing. But in 2005, I needed a new way of writing, and here's why. I don't want to get into all the particulars, but I had a new set of friends in my life who I wasn't exactly sure what was different between their lives and their writing and what I was experiencing, because it was vast and I wasn't clear why. The deeper I looked into this, the more I realized it's our backgrounds. These new friends of mine have a white collar family. They come from, their parents are doctors and lawyers, engineers, and I come from factory workers. And this had everything to do with what I discovered. Here's where it goes. When I was a child, I absorbed some tools, I guess you could call them coping mechanisms, that my family developed in order to survive their jobs. And it's funny when I hear people who have no concept of working class factory work say, oh, well, that seems easy. They really don't quite understand the destructive nature of these jobs. When my family goes to work, by the way, nobody's working 8-hour shifts. They're working about 12-hour shifts these days. When they go to the factory, they become an extension of those machines for 12 hours a day. And in order to survive that and not literally not lose your mind, they have to switch the present off. And then they live in these default systems of the past and the future in their brain. And I can hear it when I speak with them. They're either depressed about the past or anxious about the future. There's no concept of the present. And I believe that this is a symptom of capitalism, annihilating an entire group of people, entire class of people's idea about where you can be on the planet. But when you go home after working all day, it's you can't really flip that switch back very easily. My family, they're never really there when they're there. So that's sort of the short version of this. There are a lot of concerns I have about this that I could get into, but I really want to talk about why I'm doing what I'm doing. So in 2005, when I finally realized that this was the problem at hand, I knew at that point that I needed a new relationship with time. So that's where these somatic rituals get their start. I created these so that I could anchor myself in the present. So let me just very briefly tell you, in 2005 in Philadelphia, where I was living at the time, I lived in Philadelphia for 30 years, over 30 years. I decided to do a series of rituals where I was eating a single color of food for a day for 7 days. I began with red. So the very first one of the somatic poetry rituals I did involved, the result was the red poem. And I also did this by wearing a red wig around the city. I was reading, I like to go to Barnes and Noble and use them as a library, and especially I like to go to the business section in Barnes and Noble and go to the research books, the books that are invested in marketing to us objects, things that we certainly don't need, probably don't even want. I refer to this as the new anthropology. These people working in capitalism are very busy studying our behavior. By the way, not just our behavior, as in reaction behavior, but also our physiological reactions to things, or like how our bodies are put together. One of the pieces that I was reading just prior to figuring out that I needed to do these rituals was a little snippet. It was almost like an aside to a bigger conversation I was reading in one of these books, where they claimed that as much as 80 to 90% of human communication is nonverbal. Well, you might have already heard that before, but in 2005, that was news to me, and it blew my mind. I just couldn't believe that percentage was true. So I thought, well, how can I use this information that I'm finding from the new anthropology / capitalist? And well, I put it to work with that first somatic poetry ritual, wearing a red wig that I found in a beauty academy dumpster behind, down the street from where I lived at the time. It's a very long red wig. Half of it was straightened, very straight. The other half was permed very badly. It sort of looked like this when you would wear the wig. It was crazy looking. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And so when I would wear that wig around town while eating red food, writing this poem, I received continuous nonverbal communication, people walking very far around me to get away from me. Just lots of coming around the corner being like, oh, who's that? Just a lot of nonverbal communication. I learned 2 things at the end of that first day that are true still to this day. One, it worked, and that I was anchored in the present. I remained present the entire time. These rituals have made me present in ways that I had never anticipated. It's completely infiltrated my life, which is a beautiful thing. I'm happy about that. The second thing I realized was that I would have never written that poem at any other time in my life for any other reason. So I realized at the very beginning that it's the orchestration of the space around me that creates the language. Let me put it this way, to make it a little clearer. When I redo a ritual, but I alter the ingredients to the ritual a little bit, it changes the language. It changes the way I'm writing. Everything I do inside the ritual changes the language. It's very exciting. So that there's several. I want to jump into the images now that I'd like to share with you. So there were several books of rituals before this one, but I just want to start at this one. So this is the book where I decided that these rituals could do something a little more than merely keep me in the present. Not that there's anything mere about that. It's quite a big deal to be kept in the present, frankly, especially in this time period we're living in, which is just filled with distraction. No, I believe that these rituals could do something else. I had a boyfriend. I'm not going to belabor this too much, and I'm not going to share any of these poems from this book, but I had a boyfriend named Earth who was also an AIDS activist. He introduced me to ACT UP in the 1980s, and he was a few years older than I was, but I'll just let me say the shortest version of this. This is somebody who I loved very dearly, and we managed to get through the 80s and 90s somehow HIV negative. It was extraordinary. we buried, I mean, more than half of everybody we knew and loved died of AIDS in the 80s and 90s. So it was extraordinary to get through that and survive. It was a lot like sprinting across a minefield and surviving. These were very troubling times, but we got through it. And he was burnt out because he was also an environmental activist. He went to Tennessee to work in an all queer spiritual community, work in the gardens, and he was murdered while he was down there. He was tortured, raped, and then covered in gasoline and burned alive. And I was fortunate enough to receive a residency to work on this ritual at in New Hampshire, a place called McDowell. It changed my life, this ritual. I honestly believed that before this ritual, I thought that this was my life. I thought I was just going to be depressed the rest of my life. But no, this ritual completely altered everything. And I don't want to get into that ritual too much, but I do want to say this. When I was in the middle of that ritual, the next ritual became clear. And that's this next piece. So while I was sitting on the floor in New Hampshire, I don't know why it had never occurred to me before this moment, but I had this epiphany. It suddenly became clear to me that this man who I had loved so dearly, who had changed his name to Earth, did so at a time when planet Earth was being raped and gagged and tortured and scorched with fossil fuels. And that is exactly how he left this planet. And it never occurred to me until that day. And it overwhelmed me, that realization. And it led to this. This is the book that just came out recently, Amanda Paradise. Resurrect Extinct Vibration is the name of the ritual, the somatic poetry ritual. This ritual is a book-length ritual. It's only one ritual throughout the whole book, but it has 9 ingredients. I'm going to share with you just a few of those ingredients. It involves extinction. This book is dealing with extinct animals who become extinct in my lifetime. So I'm in my late 50s. According to the World Wildlife Association, human beings have managed to exterminate or get rid of 70% of the wild creatures on this planet. It's something to behold. And we're never going to get them back. But the idea with this was to fall in love with the world again as it is, not as it was. But in order to do that, I wanted to travel around I received a Creative Capital grant to complete this book, and I'm very grateful to Creative Capital because I would still be working on it if it weren't for them. I went to all 50 states. I would lie on the ground and flood my body with the field recordings of recently extinct creatures. And I didn't privilege the ears. I was thinking about research that I was reading about water molecule absorption of water. The human body is as much as 70 or sometimes higher percentage of water. Therefore, our entire bodies are listening, not just our ears. So I would put the little speakers down by my feet first, and then slowly move them up my body to my head. This is another ingredient ritual that I did. So let me just say that when I was a teenager in Philadelphia, there was a trans woman named Peppy who lived around the corner from me. Peppy was about 25 years old, 20 to 25 years older than me and my friends. Peppy was a rock. Peppy was extraordinary. We were so stressed out. with many, many friends sick and dying. And Peppy was always there to keep us straight and to make sure we weren't, taking drugs to get through our depression. I mean, Peppy was very concerned about our bodies and what we were doing with our bodies during this time period. It was extraordinary. I wanted to do, this is the part where I honor Peppy. I took copper water bottles. These are Ayurvedic medicinal bottles, but they're copper, solid copper, which is what I wanted. Copper is highly conductive. And Peppy was, when I was a teenager in Philadelphia, Peppy taught me to read tarot cards. Peppy also taught me how to work with crystals. Peppy was Native American, and she taught me how to breathe with crystals, which was one of my favorite lessons. So in these bottles, I put equal amounts of amethyst, carnelian, rose quartz, creativity, high priestess, heart chakra, right up to within an inch, and then filled them with water. And then I buried them in Minneapolis, Memphis, and Cheyenne. And then the fourth one, which is the seat of the grid, in Omaha, Nebraska. Let me explain how this worked. It took me months to get them all buried. And, you had to be rather stealth about it because, it looked like I was burying landmines or something. So nobody ever saw me, which is good. When I was traveling around the United States, I would then, after this was all built, I would then sit on top of the buried bottle in Omaha, Nebraska. And with a compass, I would align myself with Minneapolis. Minneapolis is named after, it's a very American word. It's made up from two different languages. It's the Lakota word for water, mini, infused with the Greek word for city. So we get Minneapolis, water city. And then I would connect with get myself attuned with in the direction with a compass. And then I would eat just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of dirt from the Minneapolis location, and then listen to an ambient recording from the Minneapolis location. And that would generally do the trick. And then I would just get locked into the writing, and I would start doing that for a while. And then I would turn clockwise to Memphis. Memphis, Tennessee is named after the much fabled ancient city of Memphis, Egypt. And what's interesting is if you go to the shore of the Mississippi, see, here's the Mississippi. The Mississippi River starts here. It hits Minneapolis. It comes out, hits the center of this part of the triangle, and then hits Memphis. So Memphis, Egypt is at the mouth of the Nile, the River Nile. And it takes all that energy from the Nile, and then it's used. There are some people who believe that it was used for ceremonial magicians in Giza, which is due west of Memphis, Egypt, and I'm correct about that. Memphis, Tennessee is sitting at the jawbone of the Mississippi, also taking on that massive energy, river energy. And somebody built on the Memphis, Tennessee side of the river a massive 20-story glass pyramid, an homage to Egypt, I'm assuming. So then I would turn towards Cheyenne, Wyoming being named after the great Native American tribe Cheyenne, the Cheyenne people. Also, Cheyenne, Wyoming is where my friend Peppy, her sister, lived there, and she had hoped to see her sister before she died, but Peppy died of AIDS in the early 90s and never got to see her. So I would do this, and then I would do 2 more rounds. I really enjoyed doing this. After the book was finished, I unearthed these and then dumped all the crystals on the doorstep of where Peppy had lived. And within 24 hours, all the crystals were gone. This is a Hypogeum. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hypogeum. Hypogeum, this is one that's in ancient Crete. They date back to the ancient Minoa. Here's the thing about these chambers. These were burial chambers, circular. One of the things that I like about the Hypogeum is that pregnant women would go down into the Hypogeum and meditate with their remains of their ancestors and invite their ancestors into the body of their unborn child for another life. I was thinking, when doing this ritual, especially once COVID started, because I was still writing the book when COVID began. And all I could think about when COVID began was AIDS, and comparing and contrasting that daily. And I thought, how could I contact, thinking about the Hypogeum, how could I contact all of my friends and lovers who died of AIDS? Well, there is no location for me to do that. There was no park we all visited. There was no restaurant all of us had gone to. There was no state we were all in either. People were all over the place. But we all saw the film The Wizard of Oz. So I decided to use this as a location. If you're familiar with The Wizard of Oz, occasionally I meet people who have never even heard of The Wizard of Oz, but that's fine. You don't need to know The Wizard of Oz, but there's a scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy is sent to sleep. It's this sort of magic realism script. And there's a so-called evil witch. She's not that bad. But if anything, Dorothy's the one who murdered her sister. So I don't know. I have a real feelings about like who's really at fault here. Dorothy did murder her sister and didn't even really apologize. If you look at that opening scene, there was no like, well, maybe she did. I think I need to rewatch it. I think I'm wrong. But anyway, Dorothy, the murderer, it's terrible to say that. She didn't mean to. She didn't mean it was, it wasn't first degree. Let's put it that way. So at one point, the so-called evil witch puts her to sleep in this shamanistic opium or heroin poppy sleep in this poppy field. And it is this point when Dorothy is in the shamanic sleep that all the path out of suffering becomes known. When Dorothy awakens from this, everything becomes clearer. So what I did was I would freeze this on my computer screen and then sit as far away as I could. And then with my binoculars, I would look at Dorothy and invoke the names of the dead like I was conjuring them. That evening, after I did this particular part of the ritual, I had one of my favorite dreams that I ever had in my lifetime. I was walking on a sidewalk past a church and singing came pouring out of the church. And when I walked inside, there they all were. It was everybody it was everybody I knew who died of it. It was the most beautiful dream. They were happy to see me. I was happy to see them. They didn't have AIDS anymore. They were, it was beautiful. Another part of this ritual involved working with Walmart. I would sleep in my car in Walmart parking lots. It was often, it was often the case that in the evening there would be this sort of a section of the parking lot that would have these richer retirees and their Winnebagas and their Airstreamers and these fancy travel cars, sort of in a circle like Custer's Last Stand. They did not mingle with the other people sleeping in their cars, and these were the homeless. There were, there's sort of a wealthier group of people sleeping in their vehicles, and then there's the homeless. And then there's sort of me in the middle with all of them. But the homeless people would often have, there would be entire families crammed into cars. And they would have signs in their windshields saying, we need diapers, we need baby formula, we need food, please help. And sometimes there was There was this man who looked like an old gold prospector from the 1800s, who I saw in several different cities in Montana, and where else was I at when I saw him? Oh, Denver and Ohio. And he would have a sign that would say, "I need beer money, I need cigarette money." I mean, it's not funny to need money, but it was just like, it's the contrast between needing baby formula and cigarettes. But what I would do here then when I would wake up in the morning, I would study the topography around the Walmart, because, whatever, depending on what Walmart, whatever state you're in, it's, very different. In Florida, of course, there's palm trees. In Montana, there's, Montana, it looks like the scene, the set of the Lord of the Rings, those beautiful mountains and greenery. And then I would march toward the Walmart, kind of marching, while listening to the recordings of extinct creatures. Because if there's any retail chain on this planet that has been helping eliminate life on this planet, it's Walmart. There are 9,000 of them in the lower 48 states alone. The so-called small ones have 250,000 items for sale. The super Walmarts, the super center Walmarts, which makes up more than half of them, well, there are 500,000 or more items for sale. It is one of the most unsustainable nightmares human beings have given this planet. But then I walk in a spiral formation in the store, and then I would kneel down and write. I tried lying down in the stores, and not in I wasn't being rude. It wasn't at the checkout. It was where there were not a lot of people, like where shampoo and greeting cards would meet. But they would literally pick me up and throw me out of the store. You can't be doing it. You just can't do whatever you want at Walmart. Keep that in mind. All right. So there are other things that I did, but I think that's enough for now. I want to read just a handful of the poetry from this. Ben, thank you again for that beautiful introduction. This is one of the poems that Ben mentions in the introduction. For the feral splendor that remains, for Kazim Ali. Kazim Ali now lives in San Diego, which is in Southern California, on the coast, which makes sense when you see a couple of lines in this poem about where you live and the map and all that. For the feral splendor that remains, for Kazim Ali. Sometimes I strain to hear one natural sound. When gender blurs in a poem, my world sets a tooth in the gear. If God is in me, when will I ask for my needs to be met? Every God is qualified. It is not such a secret. When I was afraid of the road, I'd learned to drive. Map says name of your city in the ocean, line drawn to it, towing behind the big party. History of life on Earth might be interesting to a visitor one day. Chewing parsley and cilantro together is for me where forest meets meadow. In a future life, would we like to fall in love with the world as it is, with no recollection of the beauty we destroy today? So this poem is titled Memories of Why I Stopped Being a Man, for Jason Dodge. This poem was most recently in an art exhibit in New York City, curated by Angela Conant. Angela wrote to me asking for me to be part of the show, and I asked for a poem of mine to be on the wall, 6 feet tall. Because the thing is, all of my poems, you might notice, they end at the bottom of the page, so their starting point is always different because they are standing up. And so Angela wrote back to me and said, I have a better idea. Let me print it on 6 feet of chiffon, She's a very feminine fabric because the show is all about toxic masculinity. So it was great. And it hung in the middle of the gallery, just very lightly would, ripple in the breeze. Angela was brilliant. Thank you, Angela. Memories of why I stopped being a man for Jason Dodge. It's normal if your cock gets hard while you are shooting, my uncle told me on my first deer hunt. Pythagoras knew the music of Jupiter and Mercury long before Nassau. But to begin again, no hero itching at the door. That never-ending search for weakness and neighbors, siblings, co-workers, rival football teams. After seeing the open body of muscle and blood, we had horrible ideas about what to do with our lives. Imagine how they gathered around the first cannon ever fired, sweaty, excited, rock hard. Before he died, Kalishnikov confessed to suffering unbearable nightmares. Surrender your nouns to my verbs, he said, he said, he said, he said. In a game of Russian roulette, I want a pair of glasses that can see the wind. I walk around town each night, watching the slightest breeze approach dry leaves like a premonition. After a million years of dreaming, the solution is still the same. Hold me to your bruised song until it warms me right. So I'm going to end this portion from Amanda Paradise by reading a handful of there's a very long poem at the back of the book called 72 Corona Transmutations, because once we were into lockdown, I brought the ritual inside. For years after friends died of AIDS, they still danced with me in my dreams. The survivors of the bubonic plague dance with their dead. Who will dance with whom in a year? Let's keep safe. Dance together in person. Names of water and wind taper until they resemble everything. Eyes closed, face tilted into rain. Here is the voice to never let us close accounts. Some days, I can only watch movies old enough every actor is dead. This is not morbid. It is the exquisite transitory chewed upon. Reach down, pull out everything we were told not to touch. Gears of the mountain inside a sleeping bear. My grandmother, Pearl, said, throw your wallet away the moment you lose your job. There are many excuses for losing jobs where I grew up. She was the only person in my family in the 1980s who asked about dying lovers and friends. She said to me after a week with 3 funerals, there was a beginning to this pain. Now you know the middle. But the end too must show itself. When you survive this, love will destroy all doubt. M drew his face the day he was diagnosed HIV positive and kept drawing as his face changed. They were sublime, like Monk's self-portrait with Spanish flu. He called on his deathbed at his parents' home to say his father was in the backyard burning the stack of drawings. I wanted to make him stop. Please don't, he said. It's his last chance to deny me. How can I deny him that? Ready to drop the certainties, we agree to live as if there is a set of spoons we can stir life with. Last year, U.S. citizens bought 18,000 tons of bullets for our undeclared civil war, hiding strength behind killing because we are too weak to find real solutions. Bullets put an end to the imagination. We had much to leave behind in order to follow the river to the sea. My grandfather said, always remember you come from people who wash after work. Migration can change a family. Some die before the end, others born along the way. I know my poems by their shapes and have felt their edges in my dreams, the side of a poem rubbed against my cheek like a bone comb or a lover's toe. So that book led me to the new work I'm doing, and I want to just briefly talk about this. And after I'm finished with going through this, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. So this ritual is loosely titled, Listen to the Golden Boomerang Return. And I didn't want to work with extinct animals. In fact, I wanted to do quite the opposite. I wanted to work with animals who are thriving in the Anthropocene. I was in the city of Seattle for a lot of lockdown, just waiting like everybody else, waiting for everybody to be kind and to stop the spread. But of course, that didn't work out. Anyway, the thing is about Seattle, it is one of the world's largest populations of crows. In fact, there's a crow research center at the Bothell campus outside of the University of Washington. And they are extraordinary creatures. They kind of run the town. This particular crow you see here that I photographed eventually allowed me to pet the beak and just a little bit of like bristly, like hair feathers that are at the base of the beak. But I didn't dare do that until they started bringing me gifts. So these are gifts that the crow brought me. I loved this bartering system. It was my favorite time exchanging anything with anybody on this planet. The first gift that the crow brought me was this. This was where I was a little like, I don't know, is this really for me? The crow would shake it back and forth. This part here is broken, but hanging on by a little thread of itself. And it would shake back and then set it down and then hammer its beak on the glass. Say, hey, 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 this is for you. Hey, hey, hey. And then shake it again and then hammer again. Hey, hey, hey. And then when the crow was certain that I saw this, they picked up a peanut and flew off. I had peanuts and fruit and crackers, and people were feeding the crows. Crows would fly by my window with hot dogs, and I was like, "Oh no, 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 no! That is the crow. These people don't understand how hard these birds are. You can't be feed this to your children, all right? Like you want to destroy somebody, destroy yourself and your children. Leave these crows alone." So I was busy trying to feed them things to combat the disgusting processed food being fed to them. So the first gift was this beautiful little twig. But when the second gift came, I knew that it was real, what was going on. And this is a little nub of translucent plastic. And when this arrived, I thought to myself, oh yeah, this is really happening. When did the crow find this? And when did they think, I know exactly who's going to love this, and then brought it to me? And then the third was this little berry that was a bit of a struggle for the crow to let go of the berry. 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the same kind of seed pod. 8 is a linden tree seed that twirled back and forth. 9 was a piece of pine bark. So if you're not familiar with Seattle, Seattle is situated inside the world's only non-tropical rainforest. So it's a lot of pine trees in such a forest. Number 10 is cat food. It's dried cat, a little half piece of red half moon cat food. Well, the crow had an extraordinarily difficult time partying with this. The crow would set it down and then look at it alarmingly with one eye, and then pick it up and set it down, look at it with the other eye. And then I just kept saying, I'm vegan, just take it. I don't want, but they left it for me. 11 was this beautiful little tiny, at the time when the crow first brought it, it was bright green. It's, you know, in the photograph, it's lost its luster, but, and I could see it catching the sunlight in this like bright, oh, this is beautiful. 12 was a piece of gold foil. And here's what I love about this. The dream I had on the night of the first gift, the crow brought me gold foil. Only it was rectangular in the dream. Never mind, that's fine. It was gold foil that came on the 12th gift. My very bossy ex-boyfriend Christopher was in the dream, exclaiming one thing or the other about thanking the crow. But anyway, yes, the crow was thanked often. I love that crow. I then took this ritual to Joshua Tree, which is in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. This was a residency program, the Joshua Tree Highlands residency program. I loved it. These kind of programs generally just take visual artists. I was lucky to get in. I felt very fortunate. I wanted to feed animals. So the very kind people who brought me, they provided enormous amounts of food for me to feed all the wild creatures. I was put in a house that was at the edge of the foothills. So you had to drive for about a mile or so on sand to even get to it. And every evening, the house would be surrounded by coyotes, and I just loved hearing them. So what I would do for this part of the ritual is that I would put these creatures into my body onto my body. I should not into. I'm vegan. I'm not eating coyotes. No. So when the coyotes would come, I would rub the backs of my ears while I would hear their sounds. They have these wonderful, magical, guttural sounds they make when they're all together, nuzzling one another, happy about the food they're eating. The quail, aren't they beautiful? Just look at those little hats they wear. I had a huge fight with this man one day who was like, I'm making hats with the quails. I've been catching and killing quail. I just lost my mind on him. I was like, you need to leave those birds alone. No humans need to be wearing your quail hats. Just leave them alone. I don't think I made any impact. But anyway, the quails make these beautiful little boop, 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 boop sound as they're running across the sand. And so your ankles, your knees, and this is the Roadrunner. Now, the Roadrunner was the most aggressive creature I had to deal with. I wasn't putting out food. Well, I was putting out food. The Roadrunner, they're carnivores. So this is what they look like when they're flying, by the way. Isn't that amazing? So that's what they look like when they're running. That's what they look like when they're flying. Isn't that just beautiful? But this bird loved to eat this. Oh, I don't know where they are. Oh, I guess I accidentally erased it. Oh no. Anyway, so the chipmunks, oh, here it is. There's the chipmunk. Sorry, a little chipmunk. The desert chipmunk. Look at the chipmunks down in the desert down there. Just these wonderful color patterns that I have never seen anywhere else on the planet. Anyway, I just love them. And I had to rescue chipmunks a few times because the Roadrunner would come in and, well, I didn't rescue all of them, but and they ate some of the birds that I was feeding too. They would murder them in front of me. But the one time I opened the glass door to this chipmunk that was screaming for help, and I opened the door, the Roadrunner was distracted, the chipmunk ran away, And then the Roadrunner came charging at me. And I closed that door just in time. I don't know what would have happened. So this is the greater Roadrunner, where they're massive. So I don't know. This bird was probably like when it was all so close to 1.5 feet, 2 foot long. You know, they're huge, they're massive. But it started slamming its very angry beak against the glass. This is the creature that I most enjoyed working with. This creature only exists in the Mojave Desert. They are called the kangaroo rat. The kangaroo rat is nocturnal. The kangaroo rat would never doesn't even know roadrunners exist probably, unless by smell. These creatures evolved, they have these little, you see their little tiny Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, you know, to hold their seeds and nuts to eat. But the hindquarters evolved to leap out of the jaws of rattlesnakes. And the very long tail, when they're up in the air hopping in midair, they can move their tail to redirect the position of where they're going to land. I just love these creatures. I wish I had a photograph of them straight on, because I would watch them at night. My boyfriend lent me this sort of infrared lens to see them in the dark. And because when you look at them straight on, those whiskers, see how long those whiskers are? I don't know if you can see the whiskers there. But when you look at them from the front, their whiskers look like a starburst coming out of their nose. It's beautiful. So another part of this ritual involves sunlight, and involves sunlight on the skin. It involves watching the sun rise wherever I'm at. And then later in the day, going on an outdoor public webcam and watching the sunrise somewhere else on the planet. Istanbul. This is a beautiful webcam. And this is Tokyo. This is the rail yards in Tokyo. So the sunrise is right here, see? And then the colors just splash across all this glass. It's quite lovely. This is Prague. This is the Nemib Desert. I've been hoping to see a creature. Do you see all these footprints? Do you see all those tracks? I see tracks, but I never see creatures drinking when I'm watching the sunrise. I need to look at it at a different time of the day, I guess. So one of the things I'm going to do, I've been watching the sunrise all across the planet. So I'm putting together these webcams. So when I'm finished this, it will be finished by watching all of the webcams in a 24-hour period, and then immediately going to a therapist who will put me under hypnosis to take me back to the first time I ever saw sunlight as a child. That's sort of the goal. So let me end by reading a handful of the poems from this new ritual. And then if anybody has questions to put in the chat, we can talk. Our little places within are not dungeons, remember, remember. Astronomers point satellites into space. The military points them down at us. The inverse relationship between love we offer and what we give. This on and off button is another opportunity to believe there are only two choices. This too must end. Battle cry connects bodies at a critical moment, while love reveals the art of pliability. Before and after, never so visceral. Sing happy birthday while harvesting organs. Sing happy birthday while stitching them into their new body. Learn to accept the unanticipated wonder for your hand when the moon reaches back. Losing something too important to lose is hard the first time. So next time, ransom April's song before it finds itself. I took my time finding the right man to build this wall against the phantasm. We're rowing to the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. We send our love. Swallowed each other until we heard each other think. Queer pirates I have loved, loosened my wilderness. No more miscounting butterflies in our utopia. Let's make poems that can rob a bank. Why not? To desire the world as it is, not as it was. Falling feather attaches to new life. For a moment, when the hammer approached, we thought, is that thing coming this way? We are the fractal, dropped to hear our own harmonics in the muffled underground hum of seeds. Thank you. I'm going to put over here for you in the chat. It should be called a chant. Oh. If you have any, thank you again for coming, all of you, and thank you for having me. Are there any? Thank you, Sue. Sue Landers, you're very sweet.
Please, everyone, put your questions and comments in the chat, and let's have a great conversation with CA.
So there is actually a question in the chat. I can read it out loud if you like. It says, I don't know if you've answered this question elsewhere, but how do you come up with the specific shapes for your poems? I understand they are meant to put emphasis on the words in each line, but do you have a specific object in mind for each poem, or is it random?
Thank you, Paula. And thank you, Aaron. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Aaron? Oh, gosh. It looks like it might be Aaron. I'm going to thank you for asking that question. You know what? Just give me 1 second. I know right where it is. It'll take me just a second to retrieve it. I wasn't planning on talking about this, so I just didn't have it out. But I know right where it is. In fact, there. I'm going to answer your question by going back to Amanda Paradise. So, and to do that, I'm going to read one more poem. I hope you don't mind me reading another poem. So the reason I'm reading, so this is the explanation to you. This is the answer to your question, but I'm going to just read the poem. Golden in the morning, crane our necks. This is the opening poem to Amanda Paradise. In a past life, I was a little fish who cleaned the shells of turtles. A dream helped me remember their deep voice of thanks. Many nights I heard sharks waiting for the tide to draw me near. When the calendar runs out, it feels lucky another awaits. All I have ever wanted was to forge the English language into a spear and drive it into my heart. Between leaping and being shoved, no lonelier place to put my faith for the swinging motion inside the dance we share. Don the extraordinary suit for this ordinary day. Take our time studying trees to imagine the nests we would build if we were birds. I ask all you talented people spending many creative hours perfecting killer drones, guns, and bombs to please know we are waiting for you on the other side of art in the no-kill zone. So that's the shape of that poem. When I began writing poems using somatic poetry rituals, they became shapes. At first, I tried to allow the poem to languish on the left margin, but I felt ill. Then I felt anxious, while also feeling compelled to move the lines off of the left margin. The more I pushed the words into the page's interior, the better I felt. Muses, ghosts, spirits, there is no doubt of their existence to me. On occasion, I have met people who say they do not believe, and I'm okay with that. For those who do believe in spirits who guide us in our poems, let me share a couple of things. One morning, as I was waking, a voice came to me from the dimension I was about to leave upon waking. The voice said, quote, "You have too many straight lines in your human world. We want to show you the way out of the violence of the line," unquote. After that, I never again resisted shaping the poems, and I was eager to allow all the help they wanted to offer. Another morning, the voice said, quote, "The shape of a poem is the space between us. The poems are the bridge we use to one another," unquote. "Who are you?" Many was the answer. Many? I began thinking of all the beautiful people I knew who died, not just grandparents who I also loved, but the many souls I knew who died of AIDS, painters, singers, prostitutes, janitors, poets. The many who died were somehow pushing up to my ear, to my hair and face, singing a little song for me to translate. From 1975 to 2005, they allowed me to write most of my poems on the left margin. Since 2005, they have wanted me to explore the broader reasons I find sustenance and strength in the poem's work. I know that's a very long way of answering you, but that's the answer. Thank you for asking. Okay, Karen has a two-part question. I have a two-part question. How do you decide on the rituals? Do they come up intuitively? Are they ever highly architectured, planned out? And how do you cultivate the sort of feeling in yourself? Let me deal with the first one first. I think that's the first one I have, right? Here's the thing. I think your name is Karen. I've never seen Karen with an E at the end, so I might be wrong. I'm sorry if I have your name wrong. When I started doing these rituals in 2005, that when I would do one, while doing that one, the next one would become clear. So doing a ritual always sort of leads me to the next one. It's I feel like I've been playing, at least with the rituals, a game of exquisite corpse with myself for over a decade and a half now. I kind of like that. You know, one goes to the next. And like I was saying at the beginning of what we were talking about today, was that the ritual that I did to overcome my depression after my boyfriend Earth's rape and murder, that one led me into the Amanda Paradise, and Amanda Paradise led me to this new work that I'm doing. So it's a matter of them all. They are, you know, I kind of like, I like that, by the way. I really like that because it's all part of the growth that I have as a poet and as a human being. So the rituals grow from one to the next, and I'm constantly being shaped by them. Let me just give you a very quick answer to that. So I was in Marfa, Texas a number of years ago at a residency through the Lannan Foundation, which I was very excited to work with them on. And I was doing a ritual that was exhausting, but I loved it. It was called Marfa Poetry Machine and 36 Rituals. I did 36 rituals every day, 36 rituals a day for 36 days. before the sun came up and long after the sun went down. I'm a Capricorn, so we make as much work for ourselves as we possibly can. I don't know why, but I don't mind. If you're a Capricorn, you don't mind, but if you work with people who are not Capricorns, they almost always mind, unless they're Tauruses. Tauruses are cool with us. They're like, yeah, let's get to work, or Virgos. But anyway, yeah. So while I was doing that in Marfa, Texas is so small that they don't deliver mail. You have to go to the post office to pick your mail up. So I went to pick up my mail one day, and as I was approaching the post office, this car very slowly, well, everything's slow down there. I slowly approached with the windows open, playing a song from my childhood called Band of Gold. It's a pop song from the 70s. And I stood still listening to the song. And I thought, oh, what is that instrument I'm hearing? And are those really the lyrics? Like, I was like, I don't remember those words. Anyway, the song was over. I went into the post office and I went about my day. Later that evening, when I'm cooking dinner, I realized how incredibly important that moment was for me. Because that was the first time while doing these rituals that I understood fully, or more fully, that these rituals are infiltrating my life completely. Because if I had heard that song before I started doing the rituals in 2005, I would have been hooked and dragged back into time, nostalgic, no. I wasn't being sentimental. I wasn't being nostalgic. I was being present. Being present every day while writing has made me present every day for every other reason in my life. And it was kind of a beautiful thing to find out that these things are changing me on that level. Okay, sorry, there's another part to your question. And how do you cultivate this sort of feeling in yourself so as to be able to lose yourself in the ritual, if that makes sense? Do you have smaller everyday rituals that allow you to enter the flow of the bigger ritual? Hopefully this is not too complicated a question. No, as a matter of fact, it's great, that question. Let me say this. The exciting news is that I've been doing them long enough to have some tools at my disposal now to deal with the problems that might take place while doing the ritual. Here's the thing. It's capitalism. I don't mind beating up capitalism whenever I can. So capitalism destroys people. It's all about the destruction of capitalism, these rituals. It was because of my factory working family that I started doing the rituals in the first place. But it is also capitalism and all the horrendous work we have. This is such a stupid idea for a planet. Jobs, this idea of jobs, you know what I mean? There actually was life for human beings before jobs. And if we want to really look at history, we need to look at the history that predates where the historians are looking for certain, if you want to look at that. Because it's not just for after the men took over. There were thousands of years before that were much different. Anyway, I just find it really grueling that we put up with this system that we're in. It's so destructive. It's so harmful. And what happens is that we're so overwhelmed with the work that we have to do and the things we need to keep together in our lives to be able to do that work, that when we go to do our own real work, the real work, meaning like our creative work, not the work for our bosses, you know what I mean? Like the creative work we're doing, it can be difficult. And when I'm inside the ritual, sometimes I'm in a mind loop. I get these mind loops where I can't stop writing these lines because my mind is captured by the day and all the stress of the day. So what I do is I have these tools that I've learned to work, very simple tools. The first tool is coffee. I don't drink coffee, but I love the smell of it. And coffee beans. Have you ever been to where they have wine tasting or perfume for sale? They have you smell coffee. beans in between things. When you smell coffee beans, it resets the olfactory, but it also jolts your system, meaning that when you smell coffee, sometimes it erases the problems in your mind. I think that's why I have friends and family, like my mother has always said, she's like, if she's in a bad mood, she's like, I need a cup of coffee. I think it's because the coffee is such an overwhelming sensation that it kind of changes the direction of everything. I don't know, it's a theory, but it does help. And if that doesn't help, then I have other things like thrash dancing. But yeah, no, the problem is there's never a problem. If there is a problem, you just deal with it in there. And the exciting thing is that when you're in the, oh, also, I didn't fully answer your question. So yeah, it's kind of a charcoal sketch, that I arrive at. Like I have an idea about what I'm going to do, but very often when I arrive at the ritual site, I can't do it the way I want to, but I'm not a purist. I believe that the ritual needs to be expanded at that point. Let me give you an example. In my previous book, While Standing in Line for Death, there's a ritual where I was in Seattle and I went to this graveyard next to Volunteer Park, which is one of my favorite public parks. It's a great park. And it's connected to, it's not really connected to, but it shares a border with a graveyard. And in that graveyard is buried the Black Mountain College poet, Denise Levertov. So I would give myself 27 minutes to locate her grave. If I didn't find her grave, I had to spend the next hour reading and writing wherever I was at. So that was my charcoal sketch, right? I arrive, my first day of doing the ritual, I arrive at the graveyard completely unaware that also buried in the same graveyard is the international superstar, Bruce Lee. So what this means is all day long, because people fly just to go visit his grave. So all day long, I mean all day long, there is a line of people at that grave to do, it's usually like young couples. Like there's usually like a young newlyweds, like the wife will have her, the young girlfriend will have her phone and she's videotaping her partner. He whips his shirt off and he does karate and he's making those sounds. Has everybody seen Bruce Lee movies? I hope so, because they're great. And you like those caterwauling sounds that he makes, those like high pitched sounds. Well, that's what you hear all day long, all around the graveyard. It just echoes. So, what am I going to put earplugs in my ears or, because no, that's what's going on in that graveyard. So that became part of the ritual. Always allow the ritual to grow. And if you don't like it, get rid of it and make another one, So I wound up calling this ritual Denise Levertov versus Bruce Lee. And it was a draw. They both won. So I hope I answered your question. Okay, let me see. Thank you for giving so much. My question, this is from Ruby. My question is about being an artist on stolen land and contending with the impossibility of belonging here. For myself as a settler descendant, your poem in Mount Monadnock Transmissions, which introduced me to your notion of the radical present, talks about, quote, life being beautiful as a sort of signal for belonging to the world. This has been an important key for me in dealing with my non-viability on this land, and I thank you for that key. I am not looking for an answer, but curious about how you think about this. I think about this a lot, and thank you for bringing that up, Ruby. And I wanted to mention this earlier. At the very beginning of today, we were getting together Sarah Dowling, who I'm so happy to see again after all these years. Sarah was mentioning the tribes from where both she is and where the University of Toronto is situated. And I had meant to mention that I am currently in Philadelphia, which is on the land It is the occupied territory, let's say, of the Lenni Lenape. And this is something that I want to say this too. I'm glad you brought this up, Ruby, because for years, I would be doing readings and workshops all throughout Canada. And this is something that was going on, and I would come back to the States and bring it up, and everybody would act like, that's great. But I don't know, it's only recently that we started doing that in the United States, is what I'm trying to say. And I feel like Canada kind of led the way for the poets. Maybe I'm wrong about, maybe I shouldn't be speaking for everybody, but it seemed like it was going on much sooner in Canada before it started happening here. And are there any other questions? The delay, can confirm the delay. I'm not sure what that means. Well, if there are no more questions, is there another question anybody might have? Do you have a favorite color to eat? Oh, yes. Oh, hi, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while. Well, I don't know. The thing is, in 2022, I've been vegan since 1988. And in 2022, my goal, I've been saying for years that I've not met a vegetable I don't like to eat. So in 2022, I want to see if that's true. So I want to see if there's a vegetable that I don't like to eat. And I say that in answer to your color, because I like to eat fruits and vegetables by their color. And purple carrots is, I don't know. I think, I will say this. If I have to eat a color, purple. Because here's the thing: when the vegetables change color, so purple carrots, if you were to look at the breakdown of the nutritional content of carrots, orange, yellow, purple are so much there, and they're also red carrots. Purple potatoes, purple sweet potatoes. Yeah. And bell peppers, they're originally green, but if you let them stay on the vine, they become, I think the next color is yellow, and then they become orange, and they become red. The red bell peppers have many, many, many more vitamins than the green pepper. Like, the longer they stay on the vine, the more nutritious they become. So yes, the darker the color, the more nutrients. I don't know. I love purple. I like purple because, okay, let me say this about purple. Are you all familiar with Judy Grahn? Oh, well, here. Oh, I'm typing, but it's going nowhere. Here, Judy Grahn. Judy Grahn is one of my favorite living poets. She's in her 90s. She's a queer poet who lives in San Francisco. She wrote an amazing book in 1990 called Another Mother Tongue, which is an exploration of queers in Europe before Europe was colonized by the church, back in pagan Europe, when everybody still worshiped the goddess. And it's amazing. And she talks about why queers like the color purple, and it comes from that time period where because purple is the beginning and the end of the rainbow. It combines the blue and the red. Well, anyway, Another Mother Tongue, Judy Grahn, purple. Those are my answers. Are there any other questions that I can answer for anybody? And
there are a couple more in the chat.
there
Leanne asks, have you ever done or considered doing your somatic rituals with other people?
Oh yeah, I do that all the time. Thank you for asking. And oh, I'm glad you asked that. Here, let me share this with you. Okay. So I know I shared this with you earlier. Didn't I? Oh wait, no. Yes. But okay, so if you go to that Linktree link and click on the link, the bottom link is called the Poetry Commons. The Poetry Commons is what I'd like to talk to you about. Everybody who's listening to me right now, I want you to please know that this is the year. I was supposed to start this in 2019 and then it didn't. There were just things that got in the way. And then of course, COVID came. So, but the idea is when I'm driving around the United States or Canada or Mexico, I want to meet with poets and your free municipal parks to build. So here's the way it goes. You can come in the afternoon to just share poetry and food together and companionship, or you can come earlier at noon and we're going to build rituals together and write together for a few hours. I want to do this wherever I go. I want to meet people. So the thing is, I would go, when I would be traveling around the United States, I would go on Facebook or Twitter and say, hey, are there any poets in Salt Lake City? Because I'm coming through. And they would say, hey, let's meet at a restaurant. And then I would get an email the next day from another poet saying, I really wanted to hang out with you all, but I can't afford that restaurant. I thought, well, we'll just go to parks because they're free. Every single town has one. And we'll all bring food to share. And there's always enough food for those who don't have money for food. So I figured, let's make it so that everybody can. Why can't everybody be involved? And every single human being is creative. So yeah, show up, let's build them together. And I'm constantly teaching, I teach my teaching for Columbia. I teach every year in the spring at Columbia University in New York City. And that starts next week. And we build things over that time period, and we build rituals together. And then over the weeks, we keep building that ritual and writing together. And that's what I love to do. I love to do that. And I've done many collaborations. And let me go a little bit further with the collaboration question. I am not, nor will I ever be, an ekphrastic poet. Nothing against the poets who are ekphrastic. My chief problem, my grief comes with the artists, the visual artists. I believe that visual artists have been using poets for centuries. Come and write a poem about my beautiful piece of art. I'm not here to write poems for visual artists. I didn't come to planet Earth to do that. Okay, so while I say that, I do like to work with visual artists. So for instance, the visual artist Candace Lynn in Los Angeles, she and I did one where this is what you do. I would create 50% of the ritual. Candace creates 50% of the ritual. We put it together. We've got this ritual we both do. And then she had these, she's a genius. I mean, if you don't know Candace Lynn, look at her website. She has so much art to look at that's anywhere from stop animation film to drawing to huge installations. So she will produce her art. I'll produce a poem. The collaboration is experiential. I believe that that's the best kind of collaboration anyway, to experience the collaboration and then have the outcome be whatever it is.
CA, there's one last question in the chat. Andrew wondering if you can talk about the shard poems.
Oh, yes, thank you. Andrew, the shard poems are all resulting from the new rituals that I'm doing. So that's all the work. All of those poems are coming out of these new, and I post them up on my Instagram page, which is on that link I just put over there. It's on there. Yeah, so the shard poems they're from that. I call them shard. I'm glad you asked that question. I call them shard through shards of light because part of the ritual involves seeing the sunrise where I'm at, seeing the sunrise somewhere else on the planet. I love watching the sunrise in India. There are all of these amazing webcams in India out on the street, watching the sunrise, watching somebody cross the street in the morning as the sun rises in Delhi is quite exciting, Shards of light. Also thinking about, some of our vitamins we eat are extraterrestrial, right? I mean, sunlight, the sun is in outer space. So the sun, The sun's rays, when they leave the sun, they take 9 minutes to hit the planet's surface. In that 9 minutes, that's 9 minutes of traveling through space to smack our skin and convert our cholesterol into vitamin D. So we have all this wonderful sort of extraterrestrial activity all day long with the sunlight we're doing. How it changes our bodies. I love it. Shards, yes. Are there any other questions?
Okay, don't see any other questions. This has been a wonderfully evocative and incredible presentation. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of everyone here and the Center for Comparative Literature for giving us so much beautiful things to hear and things to think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to you all.
And
bringing me
CA
in.
will be doing a workshop next week. So for those of you who haven't yet signed up, there's still time.
Yes, we'll talk about doing rituals there, that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the person who asked about where to sign up for the workshop, I'm just getting the link for you. So just give me a minute.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paula.
Ben, thank you again for that beautiful introduction.
My pleasure. That was fun putting that together. I was excited about this. And that was a great talk. Yeah, really interesting. It's great to hear about the new project. And this shards thing is very evocative. The shard of light, I didn't know about.
Yeah, it's all
wonderful. Oh,
very
sorry.
inspiring. I feel like, well, one needs to have these kinds of rituals in one's life. I think it almost reminded me of cognitive behavioral therapy, right?
Oh,
in
nice.
a way, focusing on the moment.
Focusing on the moment.
Yeah.
Do you all know Wen was here too? Do you know Wa in Toronto?
Certainly, we've all heard of her. Yes.
Oh my God, she's
well-known poet.
Amazing. Ritual makes time inhabitable. I agree. Oh. Well, thank you for having me. I don't know. I think one day we'll all be in the same room again. It'll be all right. We just have to get through this.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the idea of all gathering in a park. That's really something to look forward to.
Well, we'll have to meet at a park in Toronto.
Yep.
Ooh, how about the White Squirrel Park? Wa took me to that park. You know the White Squirrel Park?
No.
There's
Here
a
in
white.
Toronto?
Yeah, there's a white squirrel who lives there. We're used to. I don't know how long squirrels live, but they have a white squirrel cafe there dedicated to the white squirrel. I guess that there's an albino squirrel living in the park. We were hanging out trying to see the squirrel. I don't think we did we?
Apparently it's in Trinity Bellwoods Park, but it seems to have passed away according to Twitter.
Okay.
Oh, the white squirrel passed away.
Well, I would say that the Center for Comparative Literature is on the part of the campus where Victoria College is. And I have noticed that there are squirrels that have a very unique feature. They have a white tuft at the end of their tail.
Oh.
And you notice it a lot. It's obviously some genetic trait that keeps getting passed on, but I think of them as the Victoria College squirrels. So it's not a park, but it is very lovely. Anyway.
Oh, I want to go visit those squirrels with a white in their tail. I don't think I've ever seen a squirrel with a little bit of white in its tail.
It's kind of unusual. Yeah, that's why it's so remarkable and noticeable. Yeah. Okay. I guess people don't want to leave. They're hanging around, and we can keep on talking if people are here and would like to just stay in the moment.
We might have also tired you out. It's
Yeah,
been
that's true. That was
pretty
a
intense.
very intense talk. Yes.
Oh, I'm not tired. I'm fine. I took some vitamins before. Ran. I
Maybe
love
make some
these.
purple things before.
I love this. Do you ever use these? So
Yeah.
it's made with lion's mane mushroom and reishi mushroom and ginkgo and I don't know, all kinds of things. It really works. Keeps
Try
you
it.
focused, really focused.
Yeah, definitely have to try it. Okay. Yeah, I love that sense of psychogeography. That's a great way of putting it, Hoa. Yeah, just
Thank you, Wah.
mhm.
I like that. Psychogeographies. Activating place. Yeah, maybe it's like a little tornado of activity that wakes something up. Sometimes I think I'm doing like busy work for the muse, you know. Well, it's much colder where you are, but it's cold enough here for me.
Yeah.
How's everybody dealing? I mean, what is, you know, is everybody doing okay this time of year? It gets very dark and cold there.
Yeah. Well, the fact that a lot of things are still really constrained and restricted because of COVID. So that makes it feel even colder because there's nowhere to go, really.
It's very cold in this house right now.
Mm.
Poland is freezing. Uranus from Poland. Hello. What would anybody like to talk about? What's your favorite thing to do in Toronto?
All kinds of things.
There's Wah. Wow, your hair is getting so long. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much for hosting CA today. CA, your talk and the new work. So incredible to hear the idea of like activating play. It seems to me like creating a new geography of place with attention to time as measured seems really important to your work across your work. Anyway, that's more of a comment than a question, but I'd love to hear you speak to that if you were interested.
Thank you. And you know, the thing is, every place I go, like I was just in Rome working. I did this thing. I meant to mention this at the talk, but it's okay. I said plenty. But I just came back from Europe teaching and whatnot. But the end of that trip was in Rome, Italy. I did something I've been working towards for years, something I've been wanting to do for years, which is to take up that space in a museum. Here we all about place again, right? Taking up space in the museum that is generally for visual artists. Well, it is for visual artists. It's never for poets. And to be the exhibit, to actually live. So I lived in the macro in Rome for a week. It was supposed to be for a month, but with COVID, it couldn't be more than a week. That's okay. My first time, it was good to do it for just a week. Oh, it was amazing. I just loved every minute of it. And that's a city, I feel like that's a city that activated me because I have never been anywhere like that in my life. I've never been to Italy before. I've never been anywhere in my life where every single doorknob, every sconce, every archway, everything is beautiful. You know, I mean, everything. And I've never seen so many statues. Every morning I would run into the city to watch the sunrise at a different location, but I always wanted to see, I'm used to statues mostly being men, and you go to Rome and there are all these goddesses, you know, Minerva, all everywhere, you know, all these and they're massive. You know, I had nobody warned me that the statues were all going to be the size of the Statue of Liberty. And it's just like everywhere, these giant, giant, giant women everywhere with these flowing marble dresses and things. It's just really special. And I will say this, if it ever needs to be proven to me, at least, that the place will alter the human being, Rome is an example, because everybody I met, everywhere I went, was kind and warm. And I never had so many glasses of wine with complete strangers. Because, you know, in front of the restaurants, they would have outside these like places for you to get a glass of wine while you're waiting for your table. And they would just ask you who you are and just hand you an empty glass and pour it. You know, it was just such a different world for me. Anyway, I just really liked it. And I feel like the beauty of that city has to have something to do with the generosity and the kindness, you know. I didn't answer your question at all. I went in the opposite direction, I think. But I will say this, when I think about that ritual, for your question, when I think about that part of the ritual where I was sitting on the grid in Omaha and I would eat tiny bits of dirt from those other locations, oh, I was like trying to put those locations inside of my body and on me with the sounds, you know, listening to the recordings as well. And it really worked, you know, it really did. I felt connected. I was really happy that that worked out that way.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say you've been on you know, you've been on since, you know, almost 2 hours now, and we should let you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Thank
again.
you so much. And, you know, many of us will see you next week at the workshop. And this was a wonderful privilege to just be able to listen to this today. Thank
Well,
you
I was
so much.
honored to be here. Thank you. Have a
Bye.
beautiful night
Yeah,
in
you too.
beautiful, chilly Toronto.
We'll try to stay warm. Bye.